This is a hobby author publishing presentation, where my hobby is your entertainment. Welcome back to Shadows of Secrets. The location of the enemy is known. The time for stealth is over. The disparate, scattered embers of rebellion have been gathered into a single roaring flame. Gerrod, Ace, and Rylan have a plan. A desperate, multi-pronged assault on the Shadow Myster's fortress. The Vanguard is ready to march. Today, in Chapter 20, the Vanguard arrives. The final war for Oswegonia begins. It is a battle against impossible odds, a siege on a fortress of shadow and illusion. Tonight, the city's fate will be decided in blood and steel.
Chapter 20. The Vanguard arrives. The alley smelled of damp stone and rotting wood, the air thick with the scent of old tallow and smoke from hidden hearths. Gerrod pulled his hood lower, the weight of the city pressing against him. He missed the trees, their quiet counsel, their patient strength. But here, among the crooked buildings and narrow passages, there was only stone and shadow. Ace rapped twice on a weather-worn door, then once more, a pattern. A moment later, a narrow slit in the wood slid open, revealing sharp, wary eyes. "You're late," a gruff voice muttered. Ace snorted. "Wouldn't be if your damn city didn't have more eyes than a basilisk." The door creaked open just enough for them to slip inside. Torchlight flickered against damp stone, casting jagged shadows over a dozen hardened faces. Men and women leaned against barrels or crouched near crates, their hands resting on weapons. Short swords, daggers, even a few makeshift cudgels. At the far end of the room, a broad-shouldered man rose from his seat. His hair, streaked with silver, hung loose over his shoulders, and his face bore the lines of too many battles. Rylan. Gerrod met the man's gaze, sensing the weight of expectation there. No more delays, no more scouting. The time for quiet steps had passed. Ace cracked his knuckles. "Let's end this." Rylan paced near the fire's edge, boots scuffing against the dirt floor. The flickering light deepened the lines of worry carved into his face. His fingers twitched at his sides as if grasping at thoughts too quick to catch. When Gerrod and Ace stepped into the room, he turned sharply. "Took your time." His voice was tight, weary. But beneath the exhaustion, determination burned. "We had work to do," Gerrod said. He shook the damp from his cloak, then met Rylan's gaze. "And news." Ace wasted no time. "The enchantress is dead." Rylan froze. The breath he had been about to take stalled in his chest. "Dead?" The word came out barely more than a whisper. Gerrod nodded. "We saw it ourselves, and we found the Citadel." For a moment, Rylan said nothing. His lips parted, then pressed shut. He turned away, running a hand through his dark hair, his fingers tangling for a heartbeat before falling away. "The enchantress?" He let out a sharp breath. "Damn, I never thought." He shook his head. "And the Citadel? It's real?" Gerrod's voice was firm. "It's real." Rylan straightened, shoulders squaring. The shock lingered in his eyes, but it no longer held him still. He had made his choice long ago. "Then we do whatever it takes," he said. His voice no longer wavered. "No half measures." Rylan led them deeper into the hideout, down a narrow corridor that smelled of damp earth and old timber. The murmur of voices grew louder, a steady hum of quiet resolve. When they stepped into the main chamber, Ace let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned." The room was packed. Men and women of all trades, blacksmiths with soot-streaked faces, merchants in patched cloaks, even street urchins gripping crude daggers. A pair of weathered soldiers stood near the back, arms crossed, their expressions grim but resolute. A young woman in a seamstress's apron whispered to a wiry man who had the sharp-eyed look of a cut-purse. Gerrod swept his gaze over them, taking in the hardened jaws, popped the clenched fists, the fire in their eyes. These weren't warriors, not all of them, but they were ready. "The people are done waiting," Rylan said, stepping forward. His voice carried, no longer hesitant. "They're done kneeling." Marta, a woman with ink-stained fingers, gave a curt nod. "Supplies are tight, but we've got enough to make a stand." Rylan, the ex-soldier, folded his arms. "Most don't know a blade from a broomstick, but they're willing to learn." Elysia, the quiet seamstress, simply watched, silent but listening, always listening. Ace grunted. Numbers ain't everything. He let his gaze sweep over them again, but it sure as hell's helps. Gerrod met Rylan's eyes. Then we move forward. Rylan nodded. No half measures. The air in the chamber buzzed with a restless energy. Gerrod studied the gathered fighters, the sheer variety of them striking. Rough-handed laborers stood beside cloaked scholars, their ink-stained fingers gripping the hilts of borrowed swords. A few city guards loitered near the edges, their tabards stripped of insignia, their hands resting on their weapons, not in challenge, but in readiness. These are the people who've had enough, Rylan said, his voice steady. Some worked for the guilds once, some fought against them in secret, but all of them are here because they're done being afraid. A broad-shouldered man in a smith's apron cracked his knuckles. Tyrants fall the same as anyone else, with enough steel. A wiry woman in scholar's robes scoffed. Steel alone won't win this. Knowledge will. The guilds rule because they know the city better than anyone. From the back, a city guard stepped forward, his jaw set. They don't know everything. He tapped his boot against the stone. Tunnels, patrol shifts, blind spots. I've been feeding the resistance information for months. Now I'm ready to fight. Ace let out a low chuckle. Looks like we've got ourselves a proper army. Gerrod nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. These people weren't trained soldiers, not most of them. But they had something stronger than steel or strategy. They had conviction. Rylan met his gaze. Then let's make it count. The Resistance's hideout buzzed with activity, the air thick with the scent of oiled leather and sharpened steel. Crates of weapons were pried open, revealing blades long hidden from the guild's reach. Ace hefted a short sword, testing its balance before giving a grunt of approval. Not bad, he muttered, tossing it to a young fighter. Try not to drop it when the time comes. Gerrod examined a rack of bows, running his fingers along the worn wood. He selected one with a strong draw, nodding as he tested the string. We'll need more arrows. A fight like this won't be won in a single charge. Rylan moved between his people, overseeing the work. Marta took careful inventory, rationing out supplies with practiced efficiency. Phelan drilled a group of recruits in basic formations, his voice sharp, commanding. Elysia oversaw the stockpile of food and water, ensuring they had enough to last. We don't know how long this fight will take, Rylan said, handing Gerrod a bundle of dried rations. Might be over in a night, might drag on for days. Either way, we can't go in weak. Ace took a swig from a flask, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Ain't never fought a war on an empty stomach. Gerrod slung a quiver over his shoulder. Then we make sure we don't. As the final preparations were made, the weight of what lay ahead settled over them. There was no turning back now. The main chamber fell silent as Gerrod unrolled a tattered parchment across the heavy oak table. Faded ink marked out the intricate design of the Veiled Citadel. Corridors twisting like veins, chambers stacked upon one another, hidden passages sketched in the careful hand of a guild scribe long since dead. Rylan planted a finger on the central hall. This is where the Shadow Myster holds court. It's the most fortified part of the structure. Thick stone walls, reinforced doors, no easy way in. Ace leaned in, tracing a smaller passage near the southern wing. But here, this servant's tunnel. Looks forgotten. You sure it's still accessible? Elysia, standing quietly at the edge of the group, nodded. One of my contacts confirmed it. The guilds don't use it anymore, but it hasn't been sealed. Gerrod studied the map, his mind working through the risks. That gets us inside, but what about the city around it? If things go wrong, we need a way out. Phelan cleared his throat. I've mapped the guard rotations and patrol paths. The eastern market square stays quiet at night, fewer eyes. If we need an escape, that's our best bet. Marta tapped a smaller map beside the floor plans. And supplies? We've stashed weapons here, here, and here. Her ink-stained fingers moved with precision. No matter where the fight takes us, we'll have what we need. Rylan exhaled, scanning the gathered faces. We have one chance at this. His voice was steady, strong. Everyone knows their role. We move smart. We move fast. Gerrod met his gaze. No half measures. A chorus of murmured agreement spread through the room. The plan was set. Now, all that remained was the fight. Gerrod tapped the map, his green eyes steady. The Citadel isn't just stone and steel. It's layered in illusions. False walls, shifting corridors, glamours meant to turn you around before you even know you're lost. A murmur ran through the gathered fighters. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others set their jaws gripping their weapons tighter. Rylan lifted a hand, silencing them. That's why we wait for Marta's signal. His voice carried no hesitation. She studied the enchantments. She knows when the wards weaken. At the far end of the table, Marta adjusted her spectacles and straightened. The guilds rely on consistency, she said, her voice crisp. Every night, just before the second bell after dusk, they reset the illusions. For a brief window, the spells flicker, just for a few moments. That's our way in. Ace exhaled, crossing his arms. And if we jump too soon? The magic will turn the Citadel into a damn maze, Marta said simply, and you'll never make it to the Shadow Myster. A heavy silence followed. The weight of patience settled over them like a thick cloak. These people were ready to fight, but waiting was harder. Gerrod's voice broke through the tension. We move only when Marta gives the word. No one jumps early. No one rushes in. His gaze swept the room, meeting every pair of eyes. The guilds built their rule on control. We take that from them, and we take it on our terms. Rylan nodded, his voice firm. No mistakes. No half measures. A heavy silence settled over the chamber. Faces lined with exhaustion, hardened by grief, stared back at Ace and Gerrod. Some clenched their fists, others tightened their grips on weapons. But in every pair of eyes burned the same fire, a shared hunger for justice, for vengeance, for freedom. A young man near the front, barely past 20, lifted his chin. The guilds took my sister, sold her to pay a debt she never owed. I fight for her. A woman with a smith's build slammed a fist against her palm. They bled this city dry. I watched my neighbors starve while they feasted. No more. From the back, a grizzled city guard stepped forward. We swore to protect Oswegonia, not the bastards who rule it from the shadows. His voice was rough with conviction. They twisted the law to serve themselves. We take it back. Elysia, quiet as ever, simply nodded. She didn't speak, but the set of her shoulders said enough. Ace let the moment breathe, then gave a sharp nod. Good. Keep that fire, 'cause you'll need it before this is done. Gerrod stepped forward, his voice steady. This fight won't be easy. Some of us won't see the sunrise after, but if we do nothing, the guilds win. If we fight, we make them answer for every drop of blood they've spilled. Rylan swept his gaze over the gathered force, his own fire rekindled by theirs. He exhaled and spoke the words they all knew to be true. No half measures. The chamber turned into a flurry of movement, every second spent sharpening their edge. Fighters clustered in tight groups, murmuring over assignments, memorizing routes, counting weapons. The scratch of quills on parchment echoed as Marta made last-minute adjustments to supply lists, her ink-stained fingers flying across the page. Phelan barked orders, his voice sharp as steel. No wasted motion. You hesitate, you die. You second guess, you cost lives. He pointed to a cluster of recruits. You take the Eastern Passage. Fast, quiet, disable the sentries before they raise the alarm. Gerrod stood over the map, tracing their path with a gloved hand. Once we're inside, the main force splits. Rylan leads the strike on the Great Hall. Keep the guild enforcers busy. Ace and I take the tunnels. We get to the Myster first. Ace grunted, which means when things go bad, and they will, you best hold the line till we're done. Rylan tightened the strap on his bracer, eyes locked on the map. We don't stop moving. Hit fast. Hit hard. They won't know what's coming. Elysia passed through the crowd like a shadow, whispering final messages to those who would remain behind. Contacts, safe houses, escape routes. Just in case. The tension in the air thickened, but no one hesitated. This was it. Gerrod straightened, his voice steady. The next time we stand here, the Shadow Myster will be dead. Rylan met his gaze, then turned to the others. No half measures. The night air was sharp, thick with the scent of damp stone and distant chimney smoke. Footsteps whispered against the cobbled streets as the resistance moved through the city like a silent tide. No banners, no war cries, only grim faces and steady hands. Gerrod walked at the front, his green eyes scanning the darkened alleys and rooftops. Every shadow felt like a watching eye, every distant sound a potential threat, but there was no turning back. Beside him, Ace adjusted the strap of his sword belt, his expression unreadable. Been a long time since I marched into a fight knowing I wasn't walking out rich, he muttered. Strange feeling. Gerrod gave a small wry smile. Regrets? Ace snorted. Not a damn one. The city moved as it always did, blind to the cracks in its own armor. Tonight, those cracks belonged to them. Under the sliver of a hostile moon, the Vanguard began its infiltration, a multi-pronged strike against the indifference carved in stone. In the grimy shadows bordering the south gate, Ace exchanged a near imperceptible nod with a hooded figure, clutching a small clay flask. Across the square, near a depot piled high with barrels, the figure moved. A moment later, a sharp crack echoed, followed by a whoosh of sudden flame erupting against the depot wall. "Fire!" A panicked voice shrieked. "Get water! Get the captain!" The guards at the South Gate checkpoint, startled, hesitated at only a breath before half of them broke ranks, rushing towards the orange glow. Ace didn't waste the distraction. He kicked aside a loose iron grate near the wall's base, revealing the dark maw of a sewer entrance. "Go! Go!" he hissed. His team melted into the earth like water soaking into dry soil, pulling the grate back just as the remaining guards turned, their attention divided. In the Rivergate ward, near the seldom-used old gate, Gerrod pressed his ear to the damp stone of a tunnel wall, counting the rhythmic thud, thud of the patrol passing overhead. His own heart beat a counter-rhythm, slow and steady. 5, 6, now. He moved, a ghost in the filth-slick darkness. One by one, his team followed, climbing the rusted rungs set into the tunnel wall towards the faint rectangle of moonlight slashing through a grate above. They emerged into a narrow alley within the ivory ward. Gerrod eased the heavy grate back into place, the metal groaning softly. Just as it settled, the heavy tramp of boots echoed from the wall above, the patrol returning exactly on schedule. A breath later, and their crossing would have ended before it began. Gerrod met the tense eyes of his team and gave a single sharp nod. They vanished into the alleys. But at the North Market Gate, separating the market square from the ivory ward, the plan fractured. Dawn painted the sky in bruised purples and gray, the hour chosen for its lack of traffic. 3 covered wagons, marked with the faded insignia of a defunct textile merchant, rumbled towards the checkpoint. Phelan, hidden amongst his fighters, concealed within the wagon's false bottom, held his breath as the lead driver presented the forged manifests. 2 guards manned the gate, looking bored and weary from the night shift. One barely glanced at the papers, waving them forward with a yawn. But the second, a younger man with restless eyes, frowned. He stepped closer, tapping the manifest. "Textiles? This early? And this seal?" He squinted. It looked smudged. The driver offered a practiced, nervous smile. "Just a bit of road dust, sir. Long journey." "Open the back," the guard commanded, his hand drifting towards his sword hilt. "Standard inspection." Phelan knew the moment was lost. He gave the silent signal. The wagon erupted. Rebels burst from beneath canvas covers and false floors, blades flashing in the pale dawn light. Phelan was first, his sword whistling as he parried the suspicious guard's suddenly drawn blade. Another rebel drove a dagger into the yawning guard's side before he could react. Steel rang against steel. The rebels fought with the desperate ferocity Gerrod and Ace had drilled into them, quick, disabling strikes, using the cramped space around the wagon for cover. But the guards, though surprised, were trained soldiers. One blew a sharp blast on a signal horn before a rebel blade silenced him permanently. High above, on the ramparts of the northern wall overlooking the market, Rylan and his team had just secured their ropes after a perilous climb. They heard the horn blast, followed by the unmistakable clash of battle from the gate below. Rylan swore, peering over the edge. He saw the chaos. Phelan's team locked in a brutal melee, more guards spilling from the market side of the gatehouse. "They're pinned!" Rylan snapped. "To the gate! Move!" His team didn't hesitate. They sprinted along the wide wall top, using crenellations for cover, dispatching 2 startled sentries with swift, silent efficiency. Reaching the gatehouse tower, they rained down fire, arrows, thrown knives, onto the guards reinforcing from within the market square, disrupting their charge. Rylan saw the situation instantly. Phelan's team was taking losses, caught between the initial guards and the arriving reinforcements. More alarms were sounding deeper within the city. They couldn't hold the gate open. "Phelan!" Rylan roared from above. "The gate! Close it! Now!" Below, Phelan understood. The cost was brutal. Rebels still fighting outside the gate would be cut off, trapped. But holding the gate was suicide. "To the mechanism!" he bellowed to the nearest fighters. They fought desperately towards the heavy winch and levers, blades flashing as they held back guards trying to stop them. Metal screamed as the heavy iron-bound gate began to groan shut, sealing the ivory ward, cutting off the flow of reinforcements. But on the wrong side, Crixia and 3 other rebels stared in horror as the gap narrowed, leaving them facing the remaining, furious guards alone. Rylan turned away from the sight, his jaw clenched tight, forcing himself to lead his team down the tower stairs to join Phelan inside. Across the awakening city, the Vanguard bled, but the breaches were made. The pieces were inside the walls. The siege had truly begun. The ivory ward loomed around them, its white stone buildings rising like silent sentinels in the moonlight. The streets were empty, the wealthy tucked safely behind gilded doors, oblivious to the storm creeping through their quiet avenues. Gerrod moved like a shadow, his breath slow, controlled. His boots made no sound against the cobblestones as he signaled to the others. Across the street, Rylan and his group melted into the alleyways, disappearing behind stacks of abandoned crates and shuttered market stalls. Ace crouched near the entrance to a walled estate, scanning the rooftops. "No patrols?" he muttered under his breath. "Too quiet." Gerrod nodded. The guilds thought themselves untouchable here, untouchable and unseen, but not for much longer. The resistance moved with practiced silence. Pairs of fighters slipped into the shadows of archways, behind ornamental hedges, into darkened storefronts. The city guard turncoats among them positioned themselves at key streets, ready to block reinforcements when the time came. Elysia appeared at Gerrod's side, her voice barely a whisper. "No eyes on us yet." "Good," Gerrod murmured. He glanced at the others, their faces tense but focused. This was the moment before the storm, the held breath before the strike. Across the street, Rylan raised a fist, a silent signal. Everyone was in place. Now they waited. Gerrod crouched atop a sloped rooftop, his cloak blending into the darkness. From his vantage point, he could see the others settling into position, figures slipping into the shadows of alleys, pressing against the ivy-clad walls of walled gardens, disappearing behind merchant stalls. The resistance had become the night itself. Ace hunkered down behind a stone balustrade, his sharp eyes scanning the streets below. "Tight patrols, but nothing unexpected," he muttered. He tapped the pommel of his dagger against his knee. "They don't suspect a thing." Rylan moved among his people, checking their positions with quick, silent gestures. A group of thieves poised on a nearby rooftop passed whispered observations, guard rotations, weak points in the district's defenses, possible escape routes. A scribe crouched beside a hedge, marking details on a scrap of parchment, lips moving as he memorized the patterns of light spilling from the noble homes. Phelan adjusted his grip on his blade, nodding to a cluster of former soldiers. "We hit fast, hit hard. The moment the illusions drop, we don't hesitate." Elysia knelt behind a decorative fountain, eyes locked on the Veiled Citadel's hidden entrance. The shadows there wavered unnaturally, as if the very air resisted being watched. Gerrod exhaled, steadying himself. Every piece was in place. The moment the illusions fell, they would move as one, silent, swift, unstoppable. Now, they waited for the signal. Gerrod held the crystal lens up to his eye, the cool glass pressing against his skin. The world around him shimmered, its edges warping like heat rising from sun-baked stone. Then, slowly, the illusion cracked. Where empty streets and pristine courtyards once stood, the truth bled through. Twisting spires of dark stone, narrow bridges suspended over nothingness, and the looming bulk of the Veiled Citadel itself, hidden in plain sight. "There," Gerrod murmured, tilting the lens so Ace could see. Ace leaned in, his breath slow and measured. "Hells," he muttered. "It was right in front of us the whole time." His sharp eyes tracked the flickering ward lines that snaked through the cobblestones, keeping the magic intact. "Looks solid enough, but not invincible." Gerrod lowered the lens and nodded. "We know where to strike." Rylan appeared beside them, his voice low. "Everyone's in place. The moment Marta drops the wards, we move." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "No hesitations." Gerrod took one last look at the citadel. The air around it seemed to pulse, as if it knew what was coming. He tightened his grip on his bow. Ace rolled his shoulders. "One way or another, it ends tonight." The 3 of them shared a final glance. No turning back now. Gerrod exhaled. No half measures. And with that, they prepared to strike. Gerrod pulled a small polished stone from his belt pouch, its surface smooth beneath his fingers. He lifted it to his lips and breathed a single word in Elven. a whisper carried by magic, unseen and unheard by all but the one it was meant for. Across the district, hidden within the shadow of a grand estate, Marta felt the stone in her pocket grow warm. That was the signal. She inhaled deeply, steadying her hands as she pulled out a small vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. The resistance fighters held their breath. Hidden in alleys, gardens, and on rooftops, they watched, waiting for the world to change. Gerrod's grip tightened on his bow. Ace cracked his knuckles, shifting his weight, a wolf ready to pounce. Rylan's fingers twitched at his side, his expression unreadable, but his body coiled with anticipation. Marta uncorked the vial and poured the liquid onto the ground. The glow spread like veins of lightning, racing through the cobblestones, unraveling the unseen threads of magic. Then, the world shuddered. The air rippled. The false streets and empty courtyards wavered, their forms bending, twisting, then shattering like glass. The very air shuddered. A ripple ran through the streets, distorting the world like a reflection disturbed by a stone. Buildings wavered, their edges bending unnaturally, shadows stretching and curling before snapping back into place. Then, like a great beast rousing from slumber, the magic began to unravel. A deep hum vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. Faint threads of blue light raced along the cobblestones, climbing up walls, coiling around archways and windows before shattering like glass. The false streets, the grand facades of noble estates, all of it flickered, then dissolved. The Veiled Citadel emerged. Black stone, polished smooth as obsidian, rose from the heart of the district, its spires clawing at the sky. Gargoyle-like statues jutted from its walls, their hollow eyes gleaming with the last remnants of dying magic. Jagged bridges stretched between towers, pathways that had been invisible just moments before now exposed in stark, merciless detail. Gasps rippled through the resistance. Even those who had been prepared for the reveal faltered, staring in awe and horror. Ace let out a low breath. Damn. His fingers flexed over his blade. That's a whole lot uglier in the light. Gerrod forced himself to swallow his shock, his grip tightening on his bow. There was no time for hesitation. Rylan tore his gaze from the looming fortress. This is it. His voice was steel. No turning back. Gerrod exhaled, heart hammering. No half measures. The battle had begun. The air was thick with silence, the kind that came before a storm. The illusion had fallen, and the Veiled Citadel loomed before them, no longer hidden but just as menacing. The resistance fighters clung to the shadows, weapons drawn, muscles coiled like bowstrings. Gerrod crouched low, his breath slow and measured, fingers brushing the fletching of an arrow. His heart pounded in his ears, steady, relentless. He glanced at Rylan, whose knuckles were white against the hilt of his dagger. Ace stood like a statue, one hand resting on the pommel of his battle axe, the other flexing in readiness. Across the district, scattered through alleys, gardens, and rooftops, their people waited. Some tightened grips on blades, others shifted their weight from foot to foot, eyes locked on the dark fortress ahead. Then, from the far end of the street, a single spark flared, small, fleeting, vanishing into the night. Marta's signal. Gerrod exhaled, the tension in his chest coiling tighter. This was it. Rylan's voice was barely a whisper. No hesitations. Ace cracked his neck. No second chances. Gerrod knocked an arrow, his voice steady as steel. No half measures. Then, they moved. A hush fell over the resistance as the last remnants of the illusion dissolved. For the first time, they saw the Veiled Citadel for what it truly was, an unholy edifice of power, vast and menacing, its black stone drinking in the moonlight. A murmur rippled through the fighters, some taking a half step back, others gripping their weapons tighter. Awe, fear, and rage warred in their expressions. This was the heart of the Shadow Myster's dominion, the place where so many had vanished, where lives had been stolen and twisted beyond recognition. A young woman, barely past her teenage years, swallowed hard. Hells, it's real. A grizzled smith spat onto the cobblestones. Then we bring it down. Gerrod watched their faces, their shifting emotions, the raw humanity of this moment. Fear was natural, but so was resolve. Ace let out a sharp exhale. Ain't the first time I've done something stupid for a good cause. He cracked his knuckles. Let's get to it. Rylan's gaze swept over his people, his voice low but steady. This is what we came for. His fingers curled into fists. The guilds took everything from us. We take it back, or we die trying. No one spoke against him. The fear was there, but so was the fire. Gerrod set his jaw, his voice cutting through the tension. No half measures. A chorus of murmured agreement followed. They were ready. Gerrod inhaled slowly, steadying himself. The Veiled Citadel loomed before them, its dark spires casting jagged shadows against the night sky. The moment had come. He turned to Rylan and Ace, their faces set with determination. No more waiting, no more hiding. Move. Ace nodded once, drawing his battle axe with a quiet hiss of steel. You heard him. No stopping now. Rylan raised a clenched fist, the silent signal. The resistance surged forward. They moved like a tide, swift and unstoppable, slipping from the alleys and rooftops, pouring through the narrow streets with weapons drawn. Cloaks billowed, boots scraped against stone. No battle cries, no reckless charges, only the steady advance of a force determined to see an empire fall. Gerrod kept his bow at the ready, his breath even, his green eyes locked on the looming iron gates ahead. Behind them, the Shadow Myster waited, unaware that his reign was crumbling beneath him. Ace tightened his grip, his knuckles white. No turning back now. Rylan exhaled, his voice low but resolute. No half measures. And with that, they stormed the citadel. The silence shattered. With a unified surge, the resistance charged toward the Veiled Citadel, no longer hiding in the shadows, but rushing headlong into battle. Their footsteps pounded against the cobblestones, weapons gleaming under the moonlight. The time for waiting, for planning, for careful movements was gone. Now, only action remained. Gerrod sprinted at the front, his bow drawn, heart hammering with purpose. To his left, Rylan led a squad through a side passage, blades flashing as they cut down the first line of unsuspecting sentries. On his right, Ace moved like a force of nature, barreling ahead, his battle axe already red with the first strike. Alarms rang out. Torches flared along the citadel's walls. The Shadow Meister's enforcers poured from hidden barracks, their cloaks snapping as they rushed to meet the attack. But the resistance did not falter. A city guard turned rebel, clashed steel against steel, his battle cry ringing through the night. A scholar with nothing but a dagger and determination drove forward, striking at the men who had once ruled her life. Laborers, thieves, ex-soldiers, they all fought, their rage boiling over after years of silent suffering. Gerrod loosed his first arrow. It flew true, finding its mark in the throat of a charging guard. Ace let out a low growl. No stopping now. Rylan raised his sword high, voice steady and unyielding. No half measures. The final battle had begun.
The walls are breached. Against all odds, the Vanguard has broken through the Citadel's outer defenses, taking the fight directly to the heart of the Meister's power. The fortress, once thought impenetrable, now bleeds. But the battle is far from over. The deepest, most dangerous corridors await, and the Meister's elite guard will be defending them to the last. Can the resistance maintain its momentum? And what horrors await them in the Citadel's inner sanctum? The final battle continues in Chapter 21, The Siege of the Citadel. The fortress is open. Subscribe and charge into the breach with us.